Thanks, Vinny. I'm just gonna share my screen here, guys. Okay, everyone can see that okay?
Yeah, it looks perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks for joining, everyone. I actually met Vinny earlier this year at a conference for Modular at the University of New Brunswick. We were there kind of showcasing a few projects that we've done over the last 4 years. And he asked me if I would present here. So I'm really grateful to be able to give the opportunity to share a few things that we've been doing in Modular. So just a quick kind of introduction to our firm. So we are 9 Yard Studio. We are based out of Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. We started our firm in 2017, and most of what we've been doing is we do kind of a wide mix of things, being in the Maritimes, but we do a lot of commercial work, public architecture, restaurants and retail, and some residential. We started doing some modular in 2020, and since then, that experience has kind of replicated itself, and we've been sort of doing projects all the time, at least concept proposals for people that are interested in looking at modular solutions. So I just wanted to mention kind of how this came about, because I think before we did our first project here, our firm really hadn't done any multi-unit residential, so it's a little bit new for us. But modular was actually introduced by our client, who was Canadian Mental Health Association. And they have a lot of affordable housing units here, and they're really on the pulse of, how many homes we need to get on the market here. So this was a solution that they wanted to try, which really hasn't been done on Prince Edward Island, and I don't think there's a lot of it in the Maritimes either. So they engaged with 720 Modular here, I have in the middle, and they were really the key component of this project because they sort of bridged the gap between construction on site and construction in the factory. And they've sort of project managed that coordination between those things. So they were heavily involved in all of our projects. And I also just want to mention that a key component of this type of construction is also having a reliable manufacturer. There is, I believe, quite a few manufacturers. There's a few in the Maritimes and more across Canada, but for the purpose of the projects we've built so far, we've been working with Kent Homes out of Bucktouche, and they've produced a really great product. So this team will kind of flow throughout this presentation because they've worked on all the projects with us. So since that time, we've done a lot of modular projects. We have 5 built projects, 2 are apartment buildings and 2 are overnight emergency shelters, and 1 was an office building. In progress right now, we have 2 of our largest buildings to date that are 6-story apartment buildings. 1 is family housing and 1 is seniors housing. And they will be by far the largest volumetric modular projects that have been done in the Maritimes and across Canada, really. And then concept designs, we've been looking a lot at that for people that are considering other solutions. Municipalities in particular are looking for designs that can be modified to fit many different sites and many different areas. So these are some of the proposals we've put out over the last few years. So just a little summary of today. I'm going to keep this fairly high level, but I just kind of want to talk about why we would consider modular, some of the design principles that integrate with modular construction, the collaboration aspect of these types of projects, and then I'll just go through the few projects that we did. And I think I have about 30 to 40 minutes here, so hopefully we have a little bit of time for questions at the end. So I guess just to start, I want to clarify that modular construction is basically anything that's fabricated off-site. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm talking specifically about volumetric modular, which is really encompassing large self-contained units. So we're not talking about panelized construction or anything like that. These come as like boxes that are pretty much 80% complete by the time they arrive on site. And just to give you a visual of that, this is one of our projects being craned in. So each module is fully complete and wrapped for weather protection when it arrives here. So getting into why modular, I mean, I know that everyone here is probably very aware of our housing issues that we're facing across Canada, but I wanted to put a few numbers to it just to sort of paint the picture a little bit. So, PEI needs to construct about 2,000 to 2,600 housing units a year to accommodate our growth, and that's after catching up to the deficit that we already have. As of recent assessments, Nova Scotia has a housing shortage between 25 and 30,000 and projected that we'll need over 100,000 new dwelling units by 2032. And in New Brunswick, we've experienced a reduction of approximately 8,600 affordable housing units, which represents a 25% decrease. And also mentioned is that all the rents have doubled and tripled. And so I think we all kind of realize that we're in a bad position housing wise, and that we need to find as many solutions as possible to get more housing on the market as quickly as we can. And this is just a chart illustrating that, again, for the Maritime Province specifically, the sort of gap in the light green of what we need to fill in the next 5 years. So modular becomes one of those solutions that we can consider. There's a critical shortage of labor, particularly in the Maritime provinces, and we really can't keep pace with the current way that we're doing construction. So there's a need for new, innovative ways to get housing on the market. And I think I highlighted modular is a solution here because it's not that modular is the solution and that I think we should all be doing it. But I think it is an alternative way to how we're building now that can put more housing on the market quickly. And, one of the reasons for that is that because 80% of the work is done off-site in the factory, we're allowing local developers, local contractors to keep doing what they're doing and building locally and getting more housing on the market there. And this is providing an alternative method to do the same thing. We're also able to provide solutions in very rural areas where there's not a lot of labor or where people don't necessarily want to go build when other more urban areas are busy. Supply chain is less of an issue with the factory, although it can still be an issue. But because we're using standardized products that are supplied often, there's less chance of not being able to get these certain products. The biggest question I always have is cost. Is it cheaper? No, it's not cheaper. So if you're looking for the most economical solution, this usually gets put to the side fairly quickly. But I'm also saying not yet, because I think this is still, it's not a widely used construction method here yet. And I think as it gets more popular and efficiency of these things grows, the cost will come down and be more comparable. And I think the other thing that should be mentioned with that is that compared to traditional construction methods, there is a large cost certainty with this type of construction. 80% of the cost that's locked in before you start going. So in terms of crazy prices coming in later, or a $50 million project turning into a $60 or $70 million project at the end of the day, we're not seeing that fluctuation. And I think that is a benefit for the client. So looking at some of the design advantages or ways we look at design in terms of modular, I think maximizing efficiency, minimizing waste is really the key to the factory production. We are using more standardized components, but there is freedom within that flexibility. So, for example, for a typical volumetric box, your length can vary greatly. You know, we've kind of maxed ours out at 60 feet long, but I think you can go a little bit longer, 66 to 68 feet, and then you can kind of shorten those boxes as much as you want. So that's kind of the limitations of that. And then in terms of width, the most common box is 12 feet, but you can go up to 16 feet, kind of in 1 foot increments. After that, it becomes pretty hard to transport. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there is customization within a fairly strict grid. And this diagram on the right here, this was something we had submitted for an RFP for a municipality, and they really had no idea like what their sites were going to be, what their zoning was going to be, their height restrictions. And so we were able to offer them a few different solutions that shows how they can get units, you know, on a very narrow site, or for a site that has a 1-story zoning or 2 or 3, and kind of just modify that design to be able to fit those different areas. And that's just sort of illustrating the same thing, is how we can speed up the design process by providing one design that can be easily modified to suit different sites. So this is one thing that I think a lot of people are very interested in is speed, and modular construction is certainly can be quicker than traditional construction. And this top diagram is showing kind of just like a typical building, and then the bottom diagram is showing something that's built modular. And where we're seeing the time savings is you're able to simultaneously build your foundations on site and then build the rest of your building in the factory. So you're gaining time there by building those two things at once. You know, in a traditional building, we have to wait till our foundations are done, then we can start our framing, then we can do our rough-ins, our drywall, then our millwork, et cetera, et cetera. These boxes are being completely finished in the factory. So all the rough-ins are already done, the flooring's already laid, the kitchen's already installed, the paint's already on the walls, the lighting is already in. So there's really a lot less steps, and so we're able to gain time at the end by doing that. And while I would say it's not necessarily cheaper, there is obviously cost saved in getting the building 30 to 50% faster at the end of the day. And this is just kind of showing a similar thing for flexibility. You know, we have flexibility again within a strict grid. We do completely custom interior layouts. We do custom finishes on the interior and on the exterior, and we can customize the building function. So it's really the balance of those two things. And you'll see from some of our case studies, like we have done fairly rectangular buildings with some variation. But that's because we're doing affordable housing, and that's sort of the most economical method to do it. But if you want to do something interesting and a little bit more playful, there is opportunity to do that within that grid. So this is getting a little bit more into the details, but acoustic separation is a very important consideration when we're talking about multi-unit residential. And modular has an advantage in that each box has its own ceiling and floor. So when you stack those up, you end up with a double floor system. So you can see in this first detail, this would be like the ceiling of the unit below, and then the floor system of the unit above with an air gap in the middle. And so you're getting naturally a great STC value. And because of that, when you're inside these buildings, you can see how quiet they are. And similarly with the walls of the units separating to the next unit, we also have a double wall system with an air gap. So you're getting, again, a really great STC value. And I think one of the last things I would mention is quality control. So I'm not going to get too into the factory because I think that's honestly probably its own lecture of how they make this work. But one thing is that everything's done inside. So you're having fewer weather delays. You have consistent quality of every component that you're building. And the factory set up to have continuous inspection. So they have quality control there every day on every step of the way, making sure that everything's done properly. So this is a couple of photos we took, for each project we do. We go to the factory periodically and do our inspection to make sure that everything is how we need it to be. And essentially they go through, it's basically an assembly line. If you've never had a chance to go visit the factory, I would certainly recommend checking it out. It's very cool. But they basically build the floor system, then they put the flooring on, then they move it to the next station. They put the walls on, they move it to the next station. So it's very methodical and very organized, and very efficient. And so I just wanted to mention a couple challenges that also come with navigating this. And one of them is the regulatory authorities. We've actually had a great experience here on PEI, but I think this is still new for a lot of places, especially maybe more rural places. And trying to get something approved that someone's not familiar with can be challenging. Um, so I think, our first building here, there was a lot of questions about, how do we make sure this all works? We know that the authorities having jurisdiction are not going to travel off island to go inspect things. But we've kind of come to a position now where we're providing the CSA standards with the modules. So that's certifying that each module is meeting the codes that it needs to. And then we have the architects and the engineers in place to make sure that when they're assembled, that whole building meets code. So I think there's ways around it, but that's something that certainly could be a delay in a project if it's something new in a certain location. Secondly, I think perception and acceptance of modular construction is still very negative connotation. I think it's perceived as, like a very cheap solution. It's perceived as not as aesthetically pleasing. So I think that's always a challenge to get around. And our team has been sort of trying our best to, at the end of the day, when this building's up, that it doesn't look modular, that you could drive by it and it would look like, any other apartment building that you see. And I think we've done a good job of that, in that most people don't know the buildings that we did are modular. So I think that's one thing, and just more education on, when it's appropriate to do this solution and how we use it. And lastly, I think just production capacity. A key component of getting this to be the most efficient job possible is making sure that you're slotted into the factory at the same time you're going to build the foundation. So you're actually doing those things at the same time, and making sure that we have enough capacity in Atlantic Canada to build what we need to build is part of the challenge. And then I didn't put it on here, but of course, cost. If I'm presenting to a developer a regular wood building and modular, and one's more expensive than the other, that's always a challenge to get the more expensive one to go through. So that's something we're continuously sort of dealing with in our proposals. I just want to touch on this lightly, because I think the process of the modular design is a little bit different. I think the design mentality is the same, but how we deal with all the players is very collaborative and modular. So in our typical design bid build projects, which most of us are fairly familiar with, the client and the architect are dealing with each other together, kind of coming to a design, finishing that design. And then when you go out to tender or you go out for pricing, that's when the contractor gets involved. And with pricing volatility lately, that often means a little bit going back to the drawing board and doing some redesign to get the budget down. In our modular projects, that process is integrative through the whole thing. So from the first design meeting, you have, the architect, the engineers, the manufacturer, the 720 solutions, the modular expert, and the client all in these meetings. So you're all making decisions live every week, and you're all getting immediate feedback. So immediately if something doesn't work or if something's going to be too expensive, and you can kind of make those changes quickly. And that accelerates the whole design process. And it also ensures that everything's fully coordinated. So we're just seeing less things left out. And I wanted to highlight this too, because I don't think there's any other time in my career where I had a chance to sit in the room with a subcontractor, the people that are actually on site doing the electrical or mechanical or whatever it is, and actually listen to them about how they're going to do it and what the challenges are. And I think that's made for a really great set of drawings and a really great product, because everything we've had their feedback from the beginning. And same with authority having jurisdiction. I already touched on that, but having their input from the beginning has made this process go a lot smoother. So I think I've never had projects where I had a better team and where everyone was so collaborative. And I think that's been a really rewarding part of doing these projects. And so a few case studies I just want to go through. These are just some renderings of projects we've done for proposals, and most of them are multi-unit residential. The one in the right top corner is an office building. So there is multiple applications. I do think that it's definitely suited probably the best for multi-unit residential, just the sizing that the modules come in. So these are the three models that we've built, and I'm going to go through each of them in a little bit more detail. But Alberton Housing is the first one on the left, and it was made for a very narrow site. So it's on the same site as a community center. So it's basically half of a building. It's a single loaded corridor, but everything's accessed from the outside. So it's almost like a motel typology. Fitzroy Street in the middle there is a very typical apartment building model. It's a double loaded corridor. The most efficient way in modular is to cap the services on the ends, so having the stair exits and the elevators on the ends. So that was sort of the first thing we tried. That was the first building we built. And then thirdly, Malpec is the project that's under construction now. And there's two buildings, and it's also similar in that it's a double loaded corridor layout. But we did pull the services inbound of this building because they wanted to do family housing where they have a lot of 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units. And so we really needed to maximize those corners to get windows in there. And I think that diagram's showing 8 stories, but it is only a 6-story building. So I'll start with Fitzroy because this is the one we did first. And because it was our first project together, the design process probably took a bit longer than it would have otherwise, because there was quite a bit of learning involved in the process of modular. So this building is right downtown in Charlottetown. It's at 28 units, 4 stories. And they also have CMHA offices are on the main floor, so for tenant support. And then they also built a full basement, which has meeting spaces that the community is welcome to use. So it's kind of like a 3 boardrooms, which the community is welcome to use at will. And I already sort of talked about this, but this is the double loaded corridor model. So getting into the modules themselves. So the module itself is lengthwise of here, so top to bottom of page. And so you'll see immediately that for the 1-bedroom units, it takes 2 modules to make up 1 unit. So they arrive like this. We did consistently 12-foot wide modules here, and the length is the 60 feet with some insets for balconies. So when this arrives on site, it already has like the living room is here, the kitchen's here, it's all built in. The corridor is already there, and all the services within that unit, mechanical, electrical, is stubbed out to the corridor. So the goal of this is really, when these get put on your foundation, you want to be able to close that residential door and not go in there again. So you're really trying to minimize any amount of work in there not to get these units dirty again. They're essentially finished. So for the stair modules at the end, we did go a bit smaller because we didn't need that much space. So we went to a 10-foot module, and we only used the length that we needed here. So if I go to the layout, you can see it a little bit more clearly. So each floor has 6 one-bedroom units, and one of those 6 is accessible. And you can see the double wall systems here between modules, so it kind of indicates where the modules are separated. And then these openings are put in advance to enter between the 2 units. So you can kind of imagine, like, when you get there, this doorway between the 2 modules is the sort of the part that's unfinished. So you have to go in and patch those areas. But otherwise, we try to make everything done from the corridor. So this building is a mix of 1 bedrooms and studios. It's mostly for, a single individual. And the studios are 1 module, so they are quite small. It's kind of like a little bachelor apartment. They're a little less than 300 square feet. But that is good for the affordability aspect of this. And the 1 bedrooms are basically double that, so around 600. And this is a photo of the modules being lifted. So I think this is where people always kind of see the advantage of modular when they see that 36 modules went up in 5 days. It was a pretty impressive feat, and you can kind of see there, okay, that's where the speed happens. So like if you were away for a long weekend or something, like you would have missed this entirely, and you came back and the whole building was up, which was pretty cool to see. So this first project, from the beginning of design till occupancy, we completed in 14 months, which was pretty quick, but I think we probably still spent about 5 months in the design phase. So we tried to sort of speed that up in the future projects. And I think it's worth noting, if anyone's heard of the Rapid Housing Fund, that was a fund through CMHC they put out to do modular solutions that would be up in a very short time frame. And this project did receive that funding, which they were able to put 28 units, at least partially funded by that fund. So that was really great. And that's just a photo of the building as it's going up, as the 3rd floor is going up, and you can kind of see the insets for the balconies here. So that was it for that one. I unfortunately don't have a photo of this finished, but you can probably see it on Google if you're so inclined to search it. And we are getting our projects photographed now, so hopefully have some nicer finished photographs in the next while. So Alberton, I think, was a really great example of a different model. And again, this was through CMHA, and they really wanted to have a few examples of buildings that they could put in different locations. They own numerous housing units across the island. So again, this one was a smaller footprint. It's only 10 units, 2 stories, and we didn't do a basement in this one. We just have a crawl space for access. And again, so this is just showing the mode. We have a single loaded corridor, exterior walk-up level. And so this is the modules for this building. So it's 10 units, 18 modules. Again, we do have 1 bedroom units, so we have 2 modules per unit. And this one we went a little bit wider. We kind of wanted to see if a 14-foot module would make a large difference in the bachelor units, and honestly it did. It's wonderful for the studio units. It just gives them that nice width to put a larger bed and have a little bit bigger living room. Honestly, I don't know that we needed 14 in the bedrooms, and we would probably go back to 12 in that, because they do seem quite spacious for affordable housing. But I think what was really nice about this project is, it has natural light on both sides. So these are like very well lit units. They're very nice inside. The tenants are super happy. And one interesting way that the factory did this to maximize their efficiency, because this is essentially half of a 60-foot module. They built them as 60-foot modules in the factory, and then they brought them to site and they just cut them in half. So that was able to really cut down on transportation costs, bringing them over to the island, and it went really really smoothly. And that's just showing the floor plan. Again, it's similar to the previous one bedroom and studio units, and they do have tenant support services on the main floor. Um, so this one was 18 modules in one day, which was amazing. Alberton, if you're not familiar with PEI, Alberton is 2 hours from Charlottetown, essentially. And by the time I got there, it was like I almost missed the whole thing. So it went up really quickly. And another thing, we were really happy about this because we worked with the exact same team, same client and everything. We were able to do full design package, including construction drawings in under 6 weeks, which I don't think I could ever promise a client that I could ever do that again. But because we knew all their preferences, everything went really smoothly. And so we were able to really accelerate this project. And so project completed in 11 months, from beginning of design to end of construction. And honestly, I think we could have done that probably in 8 to 9 months. We had a lot of issues getting siding contractors up to that rural area, and it really did delay things. But yeah, the majority of work was done in 9 months, just waiting for that siding to be finished. And so we estimated about a 30% schedule saving on design development, due to working with the same team again. And that's just a few images of it being craned in. You can see how much shorter the modules are there. And you can kind of see the opening that's leading into the adjacent unit for the 1 bedroom. And that is the full building erected, with the roof. So the roof trusses get put on after by the site contractor. So this was showing that with the trusses and the roof on, just waiting for the siding. And again, I don't have a finished photograph, but this is getting pretty close to done. So you can kind of see the idea, and yeah, how we tried to make it not necessarily look like modular construction. And then lastly, this is the project that we're working on now. And it's actually 2 buildings that are going in Charlottetown, a little bit outside of the main core. So they're quite large buildings. One is more geared towards seniors, and the other one is more geared towards family. So there's 82 units and 63 units. So these are quite a lot of units in this step 1 development. And one has a full basement and one has a crawl space, so they're slightly different in that respect. And again, this was sort of just the model that we were looking at, to allow those 3 and 4 bedroom units to be on the ends. We do have, instead of individual balconies here, we did shared balconies, again, as this will be affordable housing. So for this one, we kind of took the lessons learned from the previous 2 buildings, and we used the width of the modules where we needed them. So there's 114 modules per building, so there's a lot of boxes. Again, like I had mentioned, we thought that 12 feet is really enough width for a bedroom. So we left the bedroom units at 12 feet wide. We increased the living room and kitchen areas to 13, where people are going to be spending most of their time. And then in the larger 3 and 4 bedroom units, we increased this module further to 14, since there'll be more people in those units. So it is kind of a mix of widths. The lengths, again, are consistently pretty much 60 feet. But we do have these inset areas on each side, and our service blocks are a little bit narrower just because they can be. So we have them around, I think they're actually 11'6", but yeah, so there's kind of a mix of things. So these are the 2 buildings. The first one, the top one, is the seniors building. And so it's mostly 2 bedroom and 1 bedroom units. And there is a couple studios for a single individual. But again, the 2 bedrooms are on the end, so we're able to maximize our windows into bedrooms. And then you'll see that 2 bedrooms really requires 3 modules. And then 3 bedroom and 4 bedroom is also 3 modules, just organized differently. So yeah, the multifamily building we tried to keep, because there's really not a lot of 3 bedroom housing units on the market. We tried to keep as many of those as possible, and add a few 4 bedrooms for flexibility. So that's the layouts. And then this is where we are now. So the foundation for building 1 just got poured, and the modules we're currently working through shop drawings with the factory. They're starting on the line in January. So modules are going to start arriving on PEI mid-February. So the foundation will be complete by then. And basically the idea is to be done in summer of 2024 and then immediately go into building 2. So that's just kind of a close-up of that foundation. And you can see we ended up pouring the support walls. So where you have that double wall system, the loads would go all the way down to the basement. You can do those in wood walls, but just because of the time of year we started building this, we thought it would make sense just to pour them in a concrete. So each one of these is where the modules are sitting on the foundation. And these are just a few renderings showing the idea of what these are going to look like. So you can see here the shared balconies on each floor. And that's essentially all I have. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, Shallyn. Thank you very much. We are open for questions right now, if anybody has any questions. Oh, there's a few questions here. I'm going to start with a question from George Guterres. Do you lessen the construction requirements between modules that are common to one finished unit? He has several questions here. I'm
not too sure what that one means. Do you lessen the construction requirements between modules that are common to one finished unit? Sorry, George, I'm not clear on that one.
Yeah, if you could clarify, please. Second question, are some systems within a housing unit module also modular, built off systems and placed inside the overall module? Or are they stick built in factory with the entire module?
Yeah, they are. They're not really systems. They are stick built in the factory with the entire module. That's a good question. I know like when we were at that modular conference at UMB, I know there was a lot of talk about robotics and the future of modular construction, how we can automate more systems. I don't think we're there yet. They're still building everything, but I think they do like order their kitchen cabinets, for example, and those come as units and then they get installed, but generally they're building it from scratch in the factory.
So Nick's asking, are there any additional structural requirements, considerations in modular versus traditional on-site stick frame or panelized construction?
Honestly, the principles are very similar. I wouldn't say there's a lot of differences. I think it's same as any building is like your loads are all on those module walls. So it's just about carrying your loads all the way down, which you would do in any building. Obviously, there's considerations as you get higher. Like we're going to a 6-story building, so we're upping our stud size. We have larger loads. We have larger wind loads on the higher floors. So those things all have to be considered. And how we tie these boxes together when they come to site becomes an important consideration. They all have to be like properly anchored together. But honestly, if you're familiar with stick built, it's relatively the same principles.
Shallyn, can I expand a little bit more into this question as well? Like, are you using any kind of engineering wood products in the modules for the first and second floor? Using LVL, LSL?
Yes, we have done both. We did use LVL on the perimeter. Like, for example, in our 6-story building, we have LVL on all the perimeters. So we don't, I don't know that we needed to go that way in the smaller buildings, but we have in the larger building. And we're also using a mix of, like our ceilings, for example, are 2x6s. And our floor system are 9.5 wood eyes. And then where we have mechanical units, we've increased to like an open web wood joist ceiling. So there is like a lot of mix of different systems, just where we need them, essentially.
George is asking, how are the exterior balconies, walkways constructed? They are stick frame or side, or they came modular as well?
It came modular as well. There's multiple ways to do it. We actually did it so that, like you can see it in this top right picture, the module is actually still 60 feet. We just we almost like inset it into the module. So that one's built in, but I have seen a lot of projects that 720 did out west where the balconies are like add-ons, which I'm sure you've probably seen, across the Maritimes, where it's just like a steel frame that's outside the building that you would like bolt on. So there's multiple ways to do it.
Gordon is asking, how are the sprinkler system installed within the units? Are the stairs and or elevator shafts also modular or partially modular?
The sprinkler is actually installed in the factory. What we've been doing is getting the same sprinkler contractor to go to Bucktouche to their factory, install what they need to do there in the units. And then we also hire the same person on site to connect those in the corridor. So yes, anything that's going to be in that unit, you want to have done in advance. So again, you don't have to touch it again. The stairs are also built in the factory, and you just have to sort of connect them when they come. So they built each run, and then we would connect them and we would finish them when they get there. We would do the final layer of drywall. So there is a little bit more finishing for those. And so far, yeah, the shaft has been built in the factory. We've been doing it out of wood. So trying to stay away from like adding concrete block or however you want to build your shaft. And so far, again, that's worked well. Just a lot of coordination with the elevator manufacturers.
There's another question here on the chat. Bill is asking, how are the plumbing and electrical connected between units and utilities?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. Like, I guess, for example, where we have a 1-bedroom unit that's actually 2 modules. Like, usually like the duct, for example, has to come between those 2 modules to, ventilate or heat both spaces. So usually what they would do is they would leave a small hole between the walls of those 2 things, but each individual unit the ductwork would be run in those units, and then it's just like plug and play. Either they can do it in the ceiling or in the wall, depending what the design is. And then everything's already stubbed to the corridor, and all the drywall's left off in the corridor. So like when you walk through this building, the corridors essentially look unfinished. They're just bare studs, and the ceiling's totally exposed, and those parts are completely finished by the site contractor. So you would see like all the sprinkler lines, all the electrical lines run from the electrical room, all the ductwork running through the corridor area.
Juan Carlos is asking, why not install most of the siding in factory and then complete it on site?
You can do that. That has been a request. Okay, so I think the issue that we've been having, and I know that they do it out in BC because I've seen some projects with that. That is the most efficient. I'm not sure if it's the most aesthetically pleasing for clients. So when the modules come to site, essentially they leave off like we call it like the mate line joint where those two modules come together. So you leave off all the finishes 1 foot at the top and 1 foot below that where the modules meet. And so you're going to end up with like a 2 foot gap that you have to cover, which is fine. It can be done, you know, design wise, architecturally. I'm sure there's ways to treat that. But what you're going to see is a band at every floor level that's 2 feet wide of some kind of siding. And like I said, I think our goal as a team has really been to try to make this not necessarily look modular. And I think that immediately to me is like, you see that it's modular. So I think it's been more of a preference for us, and just logistically in the factory, it made sense for us to do the siding on site. But they are doing the rigid insulation in the factory, and they're doing the strapping for the siding in the factory. So we're trying to do as much as possible in the factory, and then we're just siding on site.
A question from David Greenwell just came in. Is there a standardized method of securing modules together, or is it addressed on case-by-case basis? Do security methods need to be structurally reviewed and approved to satisfy local authorities?
Yes, we did. Our structural engineer recommended the connections. It was reviewed every time. But essentially it's just like anchor straps is what we've done between the two modules, fastened at the top and bottom. We have, like I said, we have LVLs around the perimeter, so you're attaching to each point. But those anchors specifically and how many and you know how far apart they go, that was all done by the structural engineer.
Any more questions? We still have a couple minutes left. Here, Scott Hill is asking, is this customizable through CANTs?
Sorry, what was that question?
If it's customizable through CANTs. No, this is not a regular modular housing sold by CANTs. This is like these are like one-off projects by your studio, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not, because we're dealing with large scale buildings, they're not really like repeatable without having all the consultants stamp off on them, because life safety is a huge consideration in these buildings.
So Mang's asking if you experienced any damage during transportation.
Yeah, that's a good question. Not a lot. We had one module, it wasn't even during transportation. I think it like fell off the crane in the factory parking lot or something, and they ended up having to take it back in, and they were able to like replace some of the studs and fix it up. But otherwise it's pretty minor. There is some drywall cracking sometimes that has to be patched. So that's a consideration, but they do try to, like at any of the vulnerable joints, like for example, where your ceiling meets your wall, we do have like trims that sort of cover those types of things where we expect them to be. So yeah, it's fairly minor. You get the odd maybe door that's, you know, twisted that has to be reinstalled or something, but it hasn't been a large issue for us.
So Edward is asking, how do you deal with acoustic installation on the same floor and also up and down?
On the same floor.
Between the units, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we have, so like again, we have a really good STC value because we have like a double, like for example, in our 6-story building, we have two 2x6 stud walls with an air gap in the middle, which gives you like an amazing STC. And then we have drywall on each side. So like you can rarely get that in a regular apartment building, because no one would be probably willing to build 2 full wall systems. And same with the floor and the ceiling, like you're getting 2 insulated wall assemblies with a gap in the middle. So again, I'm not sure exactly what that STC is, but like it's really good. And if you go in any of these buildings, you'll see how quiet it is.
Farhad is asking, how do you compare the material usage per unit or in total per unit? You mentioned that you have double floor ceiling assemblies and walls between units. Could you clarify how this impacts the calculation?
To be honest, that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I think that's more what Kent would do at the factory. So like we've been working in Revit, so we model all our floor systems and everything in 3D. And then we would hand that model to Kent, and they actually transfer that model into their own template, which gives them like the takeoffs that they need for all their materials. So I'm honestly not exactly sure how they manage that, but they have their own system to figure out exactly what they need.
Gordon asks, how do you handle fire blocking requirements or concealed vertical spaces between modular units?
They're all filled, so there's no gaps. Anything over, I believe, 2 inches is filled with insulation. So we don't have any fully vertical areas. Any shafts or anything like that are fully fire rated in the factory. So
David Grimel is asking, how are completed modules protected from weather prior to delivery? Are they stored indoors or weather wrapped?
they are weather wrapped. They are fully wrapped in EPDM before they come. And yeah, they are often stored outside. And even like for example, for this 6-story building, like you can only erect so many modules a day, so they're all going to be sitting outside on site, for weeks at a time. But yeah, they're completely weatherproofed in the factory and before they're shipped here.
Well, it looks like we covered all questions, Shallyn. Is that anything else you would like to say before we wrap it up?
No, I think just thank you guys for your interest. I was like shocked to see that there's 60 people here today, which is amazing. I'm certainly not a modular expert by any means, but I think we're gaining experience here, over the last 4 years. And yeah, no, just thanks for your attention today.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Shallyn, for this presentation. Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time.